Thank you for joining us at Torah Los Angeles, being held virtually around the globe. My name is Moshe Shwed, director of the DAF platform. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Rabbi Adir Posey for allowing us to present some of our lecturers who provide supplemental material to our world-class DAF Yomi Shiurim. Rabbi Yoni Levin will lead off, assistant rabbi at Eish Kodesh in Woodmere, showing how he pulls a halachic insight and brings it out daily in a short 5-minute clip. Today will be a bit longer, but he keeps it under 5 minutes every day. Followed by Dr. Henry Abramson, Dean at Torah College, who provides a daily Jewish history tidbit on every single DAF. And finally, Rabbi Shalom Rosner, world-renowned Maggid Shir, DAF Yomi Maggid Shir, Rabbi in Karen B'Yavne, Rabbi of the Nofei Shemesh community in Beit Shemesh, who gives a lumdus on the DAF every single day. These three will spend the next 45 minutes with you and show us what they offer daily on the DAF platform. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the learning.
Hello, my name is Henry Abramson, and I'm really proud to be speaking to you today at Torah LA regarding a wonderful project that I've been so excited to be involved in for the last year and a half, the Jewish History in DAF Yomi podcast that is part of the amazing alldaf.org app. And this is something that has really changed my life in such a fantastic way. And I'm really grateful to Torah LA for asking me to spend a little bit of time telling you about this, because I think it's just transformational and it is just so much fun. So let me start with the basics here. What is AllDaf? So if you're not one of the tens of thousands of people who have already subscribed and downloaded AllDaf, I mean, why not? Because it's free and it is amazing and will expose you to a wealth of wisdom and fascinating information that is related specifically to the Talmud. AllDaf is an app that features a tremendous number of speakers who will not only provide the a translation of the daf and a shir, a class to go with it, but a tremendous amount of other ancillary information, like going deeper into the daf, later commentators on the daf, and my small part, Jewish history in Daf Yomi. The whole idea is the brainchild of this man, Rabbi Moshe Shwed, who approached me about 2 years ago now and had a really audacious idea. He said, hey, what if we were to have a Jewish history class on every single daf in Gemara? 2,711 short video classes that explain something historical on every page of the Talmud. Phenomenal. I thought it was so over the top amazing, and I really had a lot of doubts about whether it could be done. But the more I thought about it, the more I was taken with the idea. And now we're like a year and a half into this project, and it's going great, thank God. So why would I think that this is maybe not such a great idea? Well, first of all, we should recall the Talmud is not a history book. It is a thing unto itself. It's totally unique, I think, in world literature, but it is, thousands of minds grappling with some of the most essential questions of human existence, and it's primarily devoted to understanding how Jews can get closer to God in their daily activities. I'm not going to try and define the Talmud here in this video, but we should understand that it's not intending to teach history unless history is, subordinate to the larger goal of getting closer to God. And so there's lots of amazing historical information in the text, but it is not presented in a sequential fashion because it's not important. The Talmud itself is far broader in scope and in many ways far deeper in focus than a recounting of chronological events, things like that. But at the same time, the Talmud was written over the course of several centuries in a particular place, in a particular political environment, social environment, economic environment, and a lot of that material is definitely relevant to the actual text that you're studying. And in many ways, as I hope to show you in this brief video, it's really impossible to understand the Gemara properly without having at least some grounding in the historical background. And the final reason why I was so hesitant to move forward with this at first was I was thinking, am I the guy to do this? I mean, sure, I really am interested in Talmud, and I've been studying Talmud for many years, and I am a historian, but this is like in a period that I've not explored very deeply myself. I only know some of the languages required to really know it properly, but you know, Rabbi Shwed has a very winning way, and I ended up going along with it, especially because my Rav, Rabbi Yaakov Trump, decided to go along with it too. So, okay, I'm all in. And now I am so excited that I have done this. Now, one thing that definitely does make me qualified to do this is that I was always fascinated with the tangents in Talmud. I remember once when I was in yeshiva, I was scolded by my Rebbe. This is an adult yeshiva. I went to Or Sameach. I was scolded by my Rebbe because I was asking too many kind of like tangential questions. And at one point he said to me, you might as well ask what color socks Rashi was wearing. And that shut me up. But I realized I was thinking to myself, you know, what color socks did Rashi wear? What color socks did they have in, 10th, 11th century France? But it got me thinking of all kinds of things. So in many ways, I think that this particular project was so uniquely devoted to my special skills or lack thereof. Let's talk about the minutiae of history, the small things in history that are sometimes essential to the study of Gemara, that they are always relevant to the study of Gemara, and sometimes they're just so entertaining. Let's look at the essential minutiae first. So, for example, just this morning, I was reading a DAF in Pesachim that had a discussion of, where do you put the mezuzahs on the gates to a city? And a long discussion of that. And if you don't have a sense of what the gates of a city might have looked like or how big they were, you won't really understand the specific context of that very unusual Gemara in the first parak. Here's an example of a ruins of a palace, the Tak Kasra, which was a palace at the city of Ctesiphon, which was right across the river from Mechoza. If you lived in Mechoza, which is an important town in the Babylonian era when the Talmud was written, and many Jews lived there, you would have been able to, just walk to the edge of your city, look across the river, and see this amazing palace. And look at those phenomenal gates. Here's a reconstruction of what they must have looked like when they were fully constructed with the building. And that all of a sudden, when you know the Gemara I'm talking about, it makes much more sense that you could have a problem if you were to be trying to check your mezuzah on these gates in a particular time and place. Another example, and we can give literally hundreds, but another example of how often understanding the historical reality is so essential to understanding the Gemara, we should recall that one of the most important figures in the Talmud is none other than Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, also known as Reish Lakish, who went through a very formative period in his youth where he was forced to be a gladiator, that he actually had to fight for his life in the Roman gladiatorial games. As you can see in this ancient piece of art, gladiators fighting against wild animals for the entertainment of the many spectators who had come. Here's another example of an ancient mosaic that shows Roman gladiators on the left, especially in the bottom. You can see one is a net fighter, heavily armed, and then the other on the right, most likely originally a slave who was thrown in, is attempting to fight him with a spear. The top frame shows after the battle when Calendio, the slave, hands forward his dagger in surrender, but you can see there's a little zero with a line scratched out through it, which indicates that after he surrendered, he was, of course, put to the death. Now, it's hard to imagine these kind of dramatic experiences not having a tremendous impact on the mind of Reish Lakish, and there are many Gemaras you could point to where his experience was signal in deciding how he would rule on a particular situation. So there are many, many examples where you can't understand the Gemara without at least having some rudimentary elements of the history. Far more common are passages in the Talmud which are best understood when you have the relevant context. So, for example, when you see Gemaras relating to Bar Kokhba and the great support that Rabbi Akiva gave to Bar Kokhba, a rebel of the 2nd century, when you see an example of the coins that he created, this was actually a silver tetradrachm, a Roman coin that Bar Kokhba's forces heated up and then re-stamped with Jewish images. On the left, you see an image of the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, and on the right, you see what appears to be a lulav, another obviously religious symbol. And here you get a sense, with the Paleo-Hebrew script on these coins, that Bar Kokhba was truly attempting to reenact some kind of religious revival, and that helps us understand Akiva's backing of this rebel, even though other rabbis did not. Similarly, the terrible destruction of Israel some 60 years earlier with the destruction of the temple by Vespasian, shown in this coin. On the left is Vespasian, on the right you see the slogan of the Romans that was literally printed into dozens of coins at the time, dozens of different impressions of coins, Judea Capta. The Jewish state is captured. And you can see there's an image there of a forlorn Jewish woman by a balsam pine guarded by a Roman soldier, meant to indicate that the Romans had imposed their control over Israel. Very difficult to understand many Gemaras after the year 70 if you can't put in context the political environment. Also, what about that passage in the Gemara when Shmuel has to flee Nahar Do? What is that all about? It doesn't even say why he had to flee, but the study of history indicates that none other than this individual, Septimus Odenathus, had invaded from neighboring Palmyra. Here you can see a map that shows you where Palmyra was and Nahar Do just to the east of it. And he invaded this region temporarily, forcing the yeshiva to decamp and reestablish itself further down the Euphrates River. All of these things are really important to see the intersection of political and historical events with events that are actually recorded in the Gemara itself. And by the way, since we're in that region, have a look at this amazing bas-relief that shows Shapur I, who was a very important Babylonian king who had very close relationships with the Jews, incidentally. And here he is receiving the submission of the Roman Emperor Valerian. Shapur I, Shvur Malka, is known as a great king in Babylonian history and also in Talmudic history. So this helps us place the information within its relevant context. Or here's another one. You know, in Psachim, lots of discussion of heseba, of leaning to the left while eating. Well, when you understand that in Hellenistic Israel, the common custom of eating, upper classes, free men in particular, was to go into a room called an andron, which was literally a dining room, but the actual translation is a men's room, because in Greek circles, men and women ate separately. I don't think that this was necessarily the case in Jewish homes at the time, but at any rate, you would go into an andron, and you would have a situation like this. This is called a triclinium, or literally a three-leaning. It's an arrangement where wealthy free men would get together over a meal, and you can see the little table in the middle there that would be removed and brought back. That's exactly the way in which the Seder plate is supposed to remind us of the table being removed and put back, and they would be waited upon while leaning to their left in this unusual setup. So you can't understand Gemara quite often unless you can actually picture what was the historical realia. And that's what I really love doing in Jewish history in DAF Yomi. Finally, there's like lots of tremendously entertaining minutiae that you can in fact understand the Gemara perfectly well without knowing this stuff, but it's just so cool. You just want to see it. So for example, discussions of the crypts and how Jews would go through burial rituals led me to have a look at some of the ancient crypts that were discovered in Beit Shan and in Italy as well, and the amazing drawings and paintings that Jews would place on their crypts in ancient times. Or, for example, since right now we're holding with Hanukkah, I spent a lot of time looking at my Hanukkah and a lot of the interesting Gemaras about that, and that led me to the book of Maccabees, which describes the heroic death of Elazar, the brother of Yehuda Maccabee, who died when he tried to kill a war elephant that was carrying some soldiers, and he thought erroneously, even Antiochus, the king himself. He courageously dove under the elephant and stabbed it from below, but unfortunately the elephant fell on him and crushed him. Now, this was incidentally a fascinating thing for many Christian artists in the Middle Ages. Jews were not that familiar with this story because the book of Maccabees was excluded from the Tanakh for discussion that's beyond our scope here. But the Christian artists making illuminated manuscripts of this in the 12th, 13th, 14th century had never seen an elephant. So these depictions of this really important scene in the book of Maccabees is often shown with an artist trying to figure out what an elephant might look like. On the left, you can see one example where he's imagining some kind of tiger, and you said it had a long nose, right? So, okay, here's a really long nose on a tiger. And here on the right, he couldn't imagine it in any other way except a horse with a very long nose. And this one looks a little bit to me like Dr. Seuss drew it. But this is like fascinating stuff. I love this stuff, don't you? I mean, Jewish history and DAF Yomi, it's amazing. There's even like scatological information in the Talmud because, Torah hi v'lil modonei tzarech. This is Torah. We need to study it. So that took me to studying, well, what did an ancient toilet actually look like? Here's an ancient toilet, talking about in the biblical period. And I'm just telling you, there's just so much fascinating history in DAF Yomi. It's a tremendous privilege to be able to produce these videos. We're now up over 700 of them, and we have about 2,000 to go. Please visit AllDAF, download it, and use it on your smartphone, or visit it online at www.alldaf.org. Enjoy the amazing shiurim by fantastic Magidei Shir, and I'm hoping you'll have a look at the Jewish history and DAF Yomi in particular. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for inviting me to tell people about this amazing new online resource. And I hope you all have a freilich and Chanukah.
Welcome to Torah LA. And this is a wonderful opportunity to spotlight the All DAF app, which offers a tremendous amount of content and options to all Lomdei DAF Yomi. I want to thank Rabbi Moshe Shwed for his leadership in this app and giving me, along with so many others, opportunity to teach. I have the zechus, along with Rabbi Yishai Bain, to give what's called the All DAF in Practice, a supplement to the DAF Yomi. It's a 5-minute or less halachic discussion related to some sugya on the DAF. And Baruch Hashem, we've received incredible feedback, and it's a really thanks to Rabbi Moshe Shwed and the OU for putting together such a wonderful app, so friendly, user-friendly, and so accessible. So thank you for all of that. The big hashikoach to all that they do, and let's go through one of these daf practices a little bit longer today, perhaps, as we're spotlighting this. But let's go through a sugya on today's daf, Maseches Pesachim, daf Chavtes. So here the Gemara discusses the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon with respect to chametz she'avar leva Pesach. The Gemara tells us on Chavtes Amud Aleph that Rabbi Shimon was kansa kanas. He made a knas. He penalized anybody who had violated, who was over aleh bebal yiray bayimatzeh, a person who violated owning chametz throughout Pesach. Such an individual has an isser. There's a knas, and the knas is that he cannot eat the chametz that was left over after Pesach, nor can he get hana from that chametz after Pesach. So there is a discussion in the poskim. Does this apply to others as well, or is it only the person who owned the chametz, but someone else, maybe they can benefit, maybe they can eat from the chametz? So there's a three-way machlokas found in the Rishonim. The Rabbeinu Manoach found on the Rambam Hilchos Chametz Matzah, Perak Aleph Halacha Daled. He quotes from the Tshuvas Arif, and the Tshuvas Arif is of the opinion that Rabbi Shimon only penalized the individual himself who was over on Bayirai Bayimatzeh. But with respect to others, there's no penalty for others. Others can take my chametz, they could eat it, they could get hana. So that's the opinion of the Rif. The Meiri quotes the opinion that says that although the individual who violated the Isser, Bayirai Bayimatzeh, cannot eat nor can he benefit, other people, although they can't eat the chametz, but they are allowed to get hana. So his understanding of the penalty was somewhat of a split with respect to others. But the third opinion, which is mostly shown, this is how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch, is that everybody, even acherim, are asked to eat and also own the to get hana from chametz she'avar leva Pesach. And this brought down very clear in Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Pesach Simin Taf Mem Ches. The Sif Gimel, the Mechaber writes, chametz shel Yisrael she'avar leva Pesach aser bana If chametz was left out, it was over from Pesach, and it's left out over Shalom Pesach, the din is asur b'hana to everyone. And the Mechaber adds, afilu henichu shogeg o onus, even if he accidentally or even onus he had left out the chametz, it's considered chametz shel Yisrael shavla Pesach. It's asur b'hana to everyone. And the Mishnah Berurah there, of course, explains the reason, like we saw in the Gemara. The kansu rabbanan, the rabbanan made a penalty. Our very Gemara Sachim DAF Chavtes. The poskim talk about what about other instances? Let's say a person left out less than a kazayis of chametz. Would that be subject to this kanas? So the din is that he would be allowed to eat it if it was left out over Pesach, because since chametz pachos mikazayis is not subject to the isser of bayirah bayimatzeh, so then the din would be it's not subject to the kanas. So another discussion of poskim. What about a katan? Let's say a child, let's say he owns a chametz, would he be subject to this kanas? So the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Taf Lamed Daled quotes in the name of the Pri Megadim that it would make sense that a person, a katan, would not be subject to the penalty. You don't penalize a katan, they're the children. So his chametz that was left out over Pesach would actually be allowed, while Pri Megadim writes in the Psicha Koleles that he felt that it should be asur, it's a low plug, that even the chametz of a katan is asur as well, bihana. What about other instances? The discussion of the poskim talk about, let's say a nachri. Let's say a nachri had given me chametz to watch. Now the din is, if I'm responsible for that chametz as a shomer, that if it were to get lost, I would have to pay him back. I'm chayv b'achrayos. So the din is, I violate bal yirah bayimatzeh. So would one be that chametz that I'm watching of the nachri? Would it be subject to the kanas of Rabbi Shimon? And the poskim say, the Rishonim point out that the chametz of a Yisrael, only a Yisrael's chametz is subject to the kanas, but not chametz of a nachri. So even though I violated, as the Yisrael, I violated the isser of bayirah bayimatzeh, but since it's not my chametz in the end of the day, it's not subject to the penalty, it's not subject to the kanas of Rabbi Shimon. But there's a very interesting discussion found in the Nod Yehuda. Listen to the following case. What is this? A good trivia question. What would be an instance where even a chametz of a yid would be allowed, would not be subject to the kanas? So this is the chiddush of the Nod Yehuda. Nod Yehuda asks the following question. It's found in the Tshuvos in Madur Kama or Chaim Siman Chaf. He asks the following shayla. At what point, when's the time that the kanas kicks in? When does a penalty kick in of Rabbi Shimon? Does it kick in already on chametz, during Pesach rather? On Pesach, any chametz that you own, the kanas already exists, even though it won't be put into action until after Pesach, but it's already chal on the chametz during Pesach, or is it only chal until after Pesach is over? Pesach is done, so there's an isser chametz during Pesach, there's no need of a kanas of Rabbi Shimon, so only after Pesach is over comes along the penalty, comes along the kanas of Rabbi Shimon. So when does it chal? So Nod Yehuda paskins that the isser of the kanas, the penalty of Rabbi Shimon, only comes into play after Pesach is all over. But during Pesach, it's unnecessary. They don't need to make a kanas. It's already asur midaraisa be'achila, asur midaraisa of hana. So he paskin it only comes after Pesach is over. So what's the relevance? What's the nafkamina? So Nod Yehuda is mechadesh the following din. Nod Yehuda is mechadesh that let's say a person, a yid, owns chametz, and he didn't sell the chametz. He didn't do bedika, he didn't do beer, he didn't do bittul. He owned the chametz, he wasn't from, but the chametz was in his possession, and it's subject to the isser of owning chametz of bayirah bayimatzeh. And then the individual dies, right? He passes away. Now, his children don't inherit it on Pesach, because you can't be yorish that which is asur b'hana. So during Pesach, it's a hefker in essence. The mace doesn't own it, he's dead. And the Yorshim don't own it because you can't yorish something that's asur b'hana. So now Pesach's over. So now the children are yorish. They're yorish the chametz now. They're yorish because now it's mutar b'hana. Would you now put the isser kana, the kanas, would it be chal on the children or not? So Nod Yehuda is mechadesh, since the moment when it's all over, when the Pesach's over, he says the chametz is now mutar b'hana, and that moment Rabbi Shimon, its kanas kicks in. But since at that very moment Shabbos is over, the father doesn't own it, it's only the children. The Yorshim own it at that moment when Pesach's over. It's a seamless transition. Pesach ends, chametz is mutter, chametz goes to the Yorshim, but the Nod Yehuda writes, but you can't put the knas on the children because they didn't do anything wrong. Had the father, let's say, been alive, so the father's chametz would be aser b'hana because of the knas, and then it bechefsa, the chametz itself carries along that knas. If he were to die after Pesach, that knas carries over to the children. But here, the moment the Yorshim are Yorish the chametz, the father wasn't alive. The knas was never chal, and therefore this psak is that this would be a situation whereby chametz, although it went through the iser of Ba'yira Ba'imatzeh, it would not carry through, the knas would not be chal on the chametz. Now, even though that's the chiddush of the Nod B'Yehuda, the Chazon Ish felt otherwise. The Chazon Ish writes in Or Chaim Siman Kuf Yud Ches in Os Dalet, he argues on the Nod B'Yehuda, and he thinks that even this case, it would be usher, because since the father, the owner, the initial father, the owner of the chametz, was alive at one moment during Pesach, he felt that the knas is chal during Pesach, and therefore it carries through to the children as well, and would be subject to the Isser Hana.
Okay, today is Psachim Daf Chav Gimel, Lumdis on the Daf, and as we do each and every day, 20 minutes per shir or so, about a topic related to the Daf. So today we're in Daf Chav Gimel, and we are in the sugyas of Machalas Asuros and Chizki and Rabbi Avo, these three Dafim, which is a lot of the basis of all of Hilchas Kashrus that we have here, and Chulin and Avodah Zarah. Those are the three. So I'd like to talk about one specific one that relates to really a Shas topic. Right in the middle of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, we have the suggestion of the Mishnah quoted and the Brisa that's quoted relating to non-kosher animals. Says the Gemara, V'hari Shratzim, D'Rachmana Amar Sheketz Hu Lo Ye'achel. By Shratzim, it says Lo Ye'achel V'Tnan, Tzaydi Chayev Ha'ofas V'Dogim, B'Shin Zanu L'Minin Tmeyin, Mutarin L'Machram L'Nachrim. What do you mean? By non-kosher is Lo Ye'achel. That should be Asur B'Hana. So why, if you have traps and there is not some non-kosher animals that also get stuck in the traps, we say that those could be sold? What do you mean? I thought Lo Ye'achel means that also Isur Hana. Shiny Hasam D'Amakra Lachem. Shalachem Yehei, special din da'araisa shalachem, so therefore you have a special heter of hana, as we've said by many of these surim listed. Ihach yafilu lechatchila nami. So if it's lachem, then even lechatchila, you should be able to say, not just nizdamnu, you happen to get some, so therefore you're allowed to sell it. Why is it just nizdamnu? Shiny hacha da'amakra yihiyu, bahavayasan yehu. No, the pasuk says yihiyu, it shall remain in its sheket state, in its non-kosher state. Yihiyu bahavayasan yehu, Rashi v'sheket yihiyu lachem. Based on this, there's a major machlokes rishonim. Tosfos says, right, the isser of selling non-kosher animals, is that an isser daraisa or an isser derabanan? So Tosfos here assumes it's an isser daraisa. Tosfos edibra maschal amar v'yim kain. If it says yihiyu bahavayasan yehu, it should be usser. Im kain susim v'chamor mechiz avninan. How do we sell horses? How do we sell donkeys? And that was the prevalent practice. V'yesh lomar demidi da'achila mayri. Right, dafka miti ta'achila. Only items that are eaten is included in the daraisa. Ubi Yerushalmi Mesechah Shviyas Parich Varei Chamor v'Gamal. The Yerushalmi asked this question. Umeshani lemelachtan hein gedelim, which means they're lemelacha. They're not for achila, and therefore it is mutter. Then Tosfos says v'im tomar, but it says in Parak Maruba and Baba Kama, Osir liyisrael agada chazirim. A Jew cannot raise pigs and sell them. Typically, to mean daraisa aser. What do you mean? There's an issa drabanan at the end of Parak Maruba. It's aser daraisa. Tosfos assumes there's a real issa daraisa. Issa daraisa to sell non-kosher animals. So what do we need? The takana of not being megada chazirim. It's included in the issa daraisa. V'yesh lomar. It's not only asur, a person has a curse. Mekam ba'arur. That means that person has curse, like the Chayrim de Rabbeinu Gershom. What does that mean? A lot of those things were asur even before Rabbeinu Gershom. Reading other people's mail. Well, you were allowed to do that before Rabbeinu Gershom. And he was mechadesh, that you're not allowed to read other people's mail? No. But he put an arur on it. He put a chayrim on it. So that's number one. Inami. Okay, there's other details, but either way, Tosfos, the assumption is Tosfos assumes that it is an Issa Daraisa. Also, the Russian Baba Kama also holds that it is an Issa Daraisa in the end there of Perek Maruba. Os Yud Gimel De'ilu Lamachro Lanachrim Af Midaraisa Aser. Right, to sell it is even Aser Midaraisa. That is Tosfos and the Rosh in Baba Kama. The Rashba seems to say that it's only Darabanan. The question how to understand the Rashba, but the way the Beis Yosef understands the Rashba is that it is a Darabanan Gzeira, you might come to eat them, and that's why it's limited to Midi Da'achila. According to Tosfos, the Rosh is a little more difficult. Why would it be limited? It's also daraisa to sell non-kosher animals that you might eat, but selling non-kosher animals that you don't usually eat, that's okay. Why would there be a chilik on a daraisa level? So the Rashba, Pashta seems to say is Drabanan Gzeira Shema Yochal. Right, the Shumas Hadashin says in Siman Reish that the pasuk is an asmachta. But again, most assume that it is a daraisa. The question of the Achronim, the Pri Chadash, and the Taz discuss, if it is derabanan, the isser of selling, then how do you read our Gemara? What does our Gemara say? Our Gemara said that lachem shalachem yehei, and therefore you're allowed to sell it. So says the Gemara, even the chachila you should be able to sell it. But one second, according to the Rashba, according to the Shumas Hadashin, it is mutter mida oraisa to sell. So what does the Gemara say? Even lachachila, it is mutter lachachila. Just midrabanan is aser. So what's the Gemara's question? And the Gemara answers, Shani hachat amakra yihiyu bava yasan yihu. It is mutter. So what's the Gemara? If it's Rabbanan, how do you read our Gemara? So says the Pri Chadash and says the Taz that what the Gemara is really asking is that if it is mutter l'chachila nami, even midrabanan, it should be mutter. Why should it be mutter even midrabanan? Because the Rabbanan don't have the authority to answer something that is beferish laheter mida oraisa. That's what the Taz quotes in the beginning of Siman Kuf Yud Zayin in Yeridea on this halach in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Kol davar she'aser min haTorah af al pi shemuter bahana im hu davar miyuchad lema'achal aser lasos bo schara." You can't do schara with it. And the Taz, after quoting one shita, which hopefully we'll get back to a little bit later, v'nira l'taretz. The eight koach biad chachamim lesser davar shepirsha haTorah beferish leheter. If the Torah says beferish leheter, they can't answer it. The ein koach biad chachamim lahachmir el b'makam she'ein bo l'ser leheter. Mefurish min haTorah. If the Torah doesn't say something, then they can answer. The Torah doesn't say that you're allowed to eat chicken and milk. It just says you're not allowed to eat beef and milk. So the Rabbanan can answer that. There's no beferish pasuk that says it's mutter. Ma she'ein kein b'makam she'ish heter mefurish min haTorah. So then that's different. Says the Pri Chadash, says the Taz, that's what the Gemara is asking. Even l'chadchila nami, even l'chadchila, the Rabbanan shouldn't be able to answer it because it's beferish mutter min haTorah. This is a yesod that the Taz writes in Kuf Yud Zayin, and it's also in Arachayim. The Taz there in Hilchas Rosh Hashanah, in Taf Kuf Peches, the Taz wonders, we know there's an Isser, Derabanan, you're not allowed to blow shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, Gzeira Shem Yisak in Kleshir, that Isser Derabanan is Gzeira, you might be Maver Dalan Amos Rishos Harabim, but one second, ask the Achronim, he quotes this from the Mizrahi, and others, why don't we say that you can never blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, even when it falls out on a weekday? Why? Because Gzeira Shem Yisak and Kleshir, there's always an Isser D'Rabbanan of blowing musical instruments on Shabbos and Yantif. So why not Rosh Hashanah too? You should say you can never blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah because Shema Yisak and Kleshir. So it says the Taz, the same Yisod that he wrote in Yeridea. And that is, if the Torah says something's mutter, the Rabbanan cannot answer it eternally. They could answer it and say, oh, this year you're not going to blow, next year you are going to blow. But to knock out a beferish heter, so then that the Rabbanan can't do. V'o nearly l'taritz de'ein lahem ligzor v'la'akar legamrei dvar Torah shetziv salatkoa b'yom zeh. Bishlama, says the Taz, bishabis lo nisakar legamrei. By Shabbos, it's not totally uprooted. Kivan she below Shabbos token b'yantif. Since without Shabbos, you're still going to blow. You're still going to blow when Yantif falls on a weekday. What the Gemara says, Masha Enkain, in the case if they would answer shofar on Rosh Hashanah, the Torah says blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. They can't answer that. And he said this is also the answer to the question of Tosfos. Tosfos in Megillah asks, why didn't the Rabbanan answer Mila Bismano on Shabbos? Shema, you might come to carry the knife. Carry the baby is a machlokas, whether that's a daraisa or Rabbanan. So you want to say it's a Rabbanan, chaynosi es atzmo, fine. But what about carrying the knife? Why don't you say, Shema, you might come to carry the knife? Therefore, when Bris Milah, day 8, falls out on Shabbos, it's also also Rabbanan. So Tosfos gives a couple of answers, because only Bekian are involved in Mila. Bris Mila is too important, it's nichras, so many brisos, but the Taz says no. There's an extra pasuk in the Torah, in Parshas Tazria. Uvayom Hashmini yimol b'sar laso. On Yom Hashmini, you have to do bris milah. It's ki'ilu, and we darshan from that pasuk afilu b'Shabbos. So it's ki'ilu, the Torah says, beferish, you could do a bris milah on Shabbos. If the Rabbanan would say you can't even do a milah bismano on Shabbos, that would be knocking out the mitzvah. Ulfi ma shekazati nicha, da Torah ribsa beferish, Yom Hashmini afilu b'Shabbos, lo ratzu lakar dvar Torah, beferish mishum gzeira. Ukiyotzi bazeh kasafti b'Yaradea semin kuf yedzayin. He must have written Yaradea first. But that's the yesod of the Taz, but it comes up here, how to read the Gemara by selling non-kosher animals. This comes up even later in Psachim. A fascinating suggestion I once heard. Tosfos in Mesechet Psachim Adav Nun. Later on, Tosfos discusses the minhag of not doing malacha on Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach, the top Tosfos, first Tosfos in Parak Malkam Shenagu, the fourth Parak. Omer Ibashem Rivadim Efarish B'Yerushalmi. Maishna Arvei Psachim Ishar Yantif. Why is Erev Pesach different than any other Yom Tovim? Mishum Dizmana Pesach Michatzos Ve'elach. Because it's the day of the Karban Pesach. Right? The other Erev Yom Tovim don't have separate karbanos beforehand, and on the day of the karban, so that's when you're not allowed to do malacha. It's like yontiv delay. V'yav yachid kamar hasam b'shari mos hashana b'yom shemevi karban aser b'malacha. The Yerushalmi, Tosfos goes to Yerushalmi, every time somebody brings a karban, that day it is a yontif. Uparich. So then the Yerushalmi asks, im kein yehei kol hayom aser. An amazing question. Every day should be aser b'malacha. Why? The karban tamid is brought on our behalf, and if the karban tamid is brought on our behalf, so then every day should be a yantif. And what does the Yerushalmi answer? Can't be. Why can't it be? Shiny tamid. Shatorah hotzia min aklal dichsiv v'yasafta deganecha. V'yemkein kol yisrael yoshvim u'betelim yasov lem dagan. It says v'yasafta deganecha. So therefore, who's going to get the dagan? So it must be that there's no isur malacha. The question is, how did that answer the question? The question was, it should be yaser. So xeris akasiv v'yasafta deganecha. That overrides the din that should be? No, maybe the pshat is like this Taz. V'yasavta deganecha means it can't be. If the Torah says beferish laheter that you're allowed to do malacha, it can't be that there's an isser, the raisa of the isser d'Rabbanan of doing malacha. The Rabbanan don't have the power to aser in that regard. This yesod of the Taz is used by the Minchas Chinuch in many, many places. The Minchas Chinuch loves this Taz. Just to quote you a few of them, this yesod, that once the Torah says something is mutter, beferish, the Rabbanan don't have the power to aser it. So we'll start in Hilchas Maisrus. The Rambam says in Hilchas Maisrus, in Paragalav Alachadal, he quotes based on the Psukim in Ezra, that since the Levim, so many Levim didn't come back to Eretz Yisrael for Bayis Sheni, Ezra Sofer, when he was getting ready, he got ready by the river in Bavel, going back to Eretz Yisrael. There were no Levim there. He had to send a message to a Levite city to get some Levim to come. They needed Levim in the base of Mikdash. So at that time, when Ezra got back, he was kones the Levim. No Meiser Rishon to the Levium. Truma, nothing to talk about. Truma goes to the Kohen. Truma is Aser to a Zar. Meiser Rishon is not Aser to a Zar. Once you take out the Truma's Meiser from the Meiser Rishon and you give that to the Kohen, Meiser Rishon, it's Gezel HaShevet. It belongs to the Levium. But Ezra said, no, doesn't go to the Levium because they didn't come back. Says the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchas Maisrus, Ein motzian ha-meiser miyad ha-kohanim, shneimar ki tichlu meis b'nei Yisrael, v'chein kol manas kahuna, ein motzian osan mi-kohen l'kohen, ve'ezra kanas es ha-Leviim bizmano, shelo yitnu lahen meiser rishon. Don't give meiser rishon to them, el yitnu l'kohanim, yinasin l'kohanim, l'fi shelo alu imo l'Yerushalayim. Because they didn't go back up to Yerushalayim with them. So the Minchas Chinuch and the earliers are Mefarshim also, but I'll read it from the Minchas Chinuch because he's the one that talks about this many, many times. The Minchas Chinuch in Mitzvah Shin Tzadi Hey. Shin Tzadi Hey. Let me just find it. Which one is it? Minchas Chinuch in Shin Tzadi Hey says, how could Ezra do this? Doesn't it say that the Leviim are supposed to get Meiser Rishon? The Leviim are allowed to get Meiser Rishon? That's what the Torah says. Right, so how could Ezra do this? L'chara kasha. This is Minchas Chinuch in Shin Tzadi Hey. After he quotes the Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Pevav, where this Gezerah is from. L'chara kasha. L'fi das hataz b'yaredeya kuf yud zayin ubarach chayim taf kuf peches. Shekasa the davar mafurish b'Torah in yecholim chachamim la'akar mishum siag, that they can't be okarid. So then, how could this be? Kivan to the Rabbi Akiva Meiser Rishon l'Leviim u'mafurish b'Torah hech yachol Ezra la'akar. How could he okarit? That's the yesod. They can't. The Rabbanan can't do whatever they want. There are limits, right? Gzeira l'gzeira, Rashi in the beginning of Maseches Beitza, Daf Beis Amud Beis, also says Gzeira L'Gzeira. It's usher for them to do a Gzeira L'Gzeira. Not just that they wouldn't, but they couldn't. There are limits on their authority. So here they can't do this. Lanias Daidi, he says that's why the Rambam says what he says. The Rambam that I just read quickly before. What's the Rambam's lashon? Ezra was kones, the Leviim bismano. Bismano, in his time. That's the key. It wasn't forever. It was just at that time. Lanias Daidi near Demizeh Yatzal Rambam Sof Pergal the Trumos. The Sover, maybe it's first of all he says maybe it's only to Rabbanan bisman hazeh, and then Vahanireh. I'm sorry, that's the suggestion of the Kesef Mishnah about the Bismano. But the Minchas Chinuch says maybe it's only because it's Rabbanan Bismano. If it was Daraisa, you wouldn't be able to do it. Okay, that's one place where he uses the Taz. If you look in Taf Kuf Sadi Dalid, fascinating application. Malchus, the Torah says how many Malchus? Arboim Yakenu. Arboim Yakenu Lo Yosef. Chazal say 39. Chazal say 40 means 39. And if I would give a 40th, I'd violate an Issa Daraisa. 1 second, doesn't the Torah say Beferish, you could give 40? See, he's bothered. How can the Rabbanan aser that 40th lash? According to the Taz. He quotes Mavur B'Torah de Malchus Arboim. Ach Rabbanan, Sevir Hu Dein Lokin Al Lamates, B'Mispar Arboim, Hu Limud Gamur, Vim came in a Torah and Lokin Ramalchus Lamates. If you say that it's as if the Torah says 39, then you don't have a problem. Ach Rambam Kosav, Lefichach Amru Chachamim. Makinos olamites. V'hu legeder lav de lo Yosef shelo yuchal avo Yosafa. But what about according to the Taz? Sarachian heich yichol chazal lakar davar mefurish bator legamri mishum siag to open legamri de mishum pam lo yilku arboim ayin Taz Yeredeya ayin Taz. And therefore he has a problem. He says that's why. Alke nira kedira kesef mishnah. The Gama Rambam spherele must be that everybody else this is din daraisa because of that Taz. It can't be to take the Rambam literally that it's only drabanan. So you have it by Maisris, you have it here by Malchus, you have it by two more. Again, the Minchas Chinuch writes this all over. I'm just quoting 4 of them. The Minchas Chinuch says it in Reish Nun Dalid, the mitzvah of Mora Mikdash. Mitzvah Mora Mikdash, which is the reason about the one is not allowed to walk onto Har HaBayis. One of the reasons, Klomar, Shena Lira Min HaMikdash, says the Chinuch in Reish Nun Dalid, Klomar Shena Mideu B'Nafsho Seinu Makom HaPachad V'Yira. We have to have one place that's going to be a place of inspiration. Kadeshi Yisrachachu Livavenu. Bivoenu sham lehispalel o lahakriv karbanos. Right? To those who to soften the hearts of those who are going to be makriv karbanos. Shenamar mikdashi tiro v'chulu upirshu zechron lavracha. They talk about the mitzvah of Mora, midinia mitzvah, and part of the dinim about not building something similar. But then what's important for us, he quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin Kuf Aleph, Ein roi klal hasheves bazara. Can't sit in the Azara. Kiyem Malchus Beis David Mishum Kavod Malchus. Only Malchus Beis David. Only Malchus Beis David because of Kavod Malchus. Says the Minchas Chinuch. Here again, the sitting in the Azara is a machlokas. We showed him. Is it daraisa? Is it drabanan? Is it halacha Moshe Misinai? So there he also talks about whether there's a raya that it's daraisa. He says, look at Rashi. Shapir de'en kavod shamayim bekach near the midrabananu. The language of ein kavod shamayim sounds like it's midrabanan. The concept after the Rashi of time amasha asra Torah yeshiva. Is it daraisa? Is it drabanan? Uledidi ein raya. The afshar shul midrabanan. It's possible it's asr midrabanan. Mikam makom kiva the chazina de mefurish bikra. Did David Hamelech yashav imkein lo hayakor ben chazal osro. Right, Chazal kin and aser it once the David sat. Kemosha kasav ataz yaredeya the arachayim. That's not even a beferish hat. Just David Hamelech did it. Fascinating. And one final one, and that is Shin Chav Gimel, which actually takes us to the next topic also. Shin Chav Gimel regarding the Isser Malacha on Chalamoid. We know there's a machlokas we've shown him. Chalamoid, Isser Malacha, Da'araisa, D'Rabanan. So says the Minchas Chinuch in Shin Chav Gimel, Oz Gimel, V'li Nira, Denicha Mishakasav Hataz, to come out the Atavar, Bama Furish, because of Laheter, in Kok Biacham Lasar, V'yem Kain. If it's an Issa Daraisa, how could the Rabbanan, if the Torah says Mefurish, that it's mutter, how could the Rabbanan aser Malacha on Chalamoid? Imken kasha hech yuchlu chazal lakar ligzar iser v'chalamoid. Habab Mefurish baTorah laheter. Ve'ein ze biyadam davar ze. It's not in their control. Al karchach tzarich lomar. The einu Mefurish baTorah. The nucha lomar hapshat because of Chag Asar. It must be not Mefurish. It must be that it's not mafurish. You have to either change the Rabbanan or change the understanding of the Torah. So it must be that it's not mafurish. That's the Minchas Chinuch. So the Minchas Chinuch loves this Taz. There are certain shitas that the Minchas Chinuch loves. The Rashi and Shvuas on Daf Chaf about giving Hasra with the pasuk. There are a couple of shitos that the Minchas Chinuch quotes over and over again in his Sefer. But back to that first Taz in Yeridea, there's another suggestion. There's another suggestion to answer the original question. Remember the original question? How can you read our Gemara if the Isser is D'Rabbanan? L'chadchila nami, it is mutter. So the Taz says maybe there is another understanding of that Rashba. And again, we get back to a question we asked before. If it's Aser Da'araisa, then why are some animals mutter, some animals Aser? Right? Animals that are eaten are Aser Da'araisa. Animals that are not eaten are mutter. How is that? So the Taz writes there in the beginning of Kuf Yud Zayin that maybe it's relating to another Shas topic, and that is Masra HaKasav L'Chachamim. One or maybe two places in Shas, the Chazal tell us that principle, again, it's by Isser Malach on Chol HaMoed, but that's what the Taz says. Maybe that's how the Rashba and others understand it. Venira, at the beginning of Kuf Yud Zayin, in that same Taz, Ta Rashba Kasav Gzeira Zusha HaTorah Asra Mishum. Mida chaziran hatera mishum lachem, v'isura misham yihiyu. Our Gemara. There's lachem, there's yihiyu. How do you put those together? Harei adavar masur l'chachamim. Shem yivcharu ma yeh asur ma yeh mutter. That's it. Dugma l'davar. Isser malacha d'chol hamoed. And there are many examples of this. Remember the Ran at the end of Maseches Yuma. How could it be, right, machlokas, whether the other four inuyim are daraisa or darabanan? If you say they're daraisa, how could a kala, how could a melech wash? That's one of the rayas that is darabanan, according to Bali Atosis. Say, how could other Rishonim say that it's daraisa just without kares? Masra kasav l'chachamim, the Ran says, and therefore the Rabbanan could decide the contours of the malacha. That's a unique principle, which we'll have to have another shir about at some point, but usually the Rabbanan explain the din daraisa. Here, Masra kasav l'chachamim means they even have the power to create the contours of the malacha itself, so that's another way to understand the Isser, and maybe another way to read our Gemara. Okay, we'll have to stop here. Again, those watching from the Los Angeles Torah program, all we should chazak ve'amatz with DAF Yomi and with Lumdis on the DAF. Feel free to join us on the All DAF app. Have a great day.